Good morning. I'm Tim Phillips with Americans for Prosperity. Thank you for joining us today. Tomorrow is a big vote in the House of Representatives. Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden have their $1.9 trillion boondoggle. They're calling it pandemic relief. We know it's nothing of the sort. It's just more big spending for a left-wing ideological wish list, which is not the time to be doing that for our country. Frankly, there's never a good time for that. To discuss it today, we have our Tennessee Americans for Prosperity State Director, Tori Venable, and a very special guest. Tori, thanks for all you're doing in the great state of Tennessee. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Tim, and thank you to all the Tennesseans joining us here today. I'd like to introduce you to the Carhart Congressman. We also knew him as a state senator and Knox County mayor. I would like to welcome Representative Tim Burchett to the broadcast with us. I'm sure you've seen plenty of the Facebook Lives with Tim, the other Tim, the Congressman Tim Burchett. So, Congressman Burchett, the first question I've got for you, we know this $1.9 trillion spending bill is coming up. And what do you see is the most egregious, wasteful spending contained in that bill?
It's kind of like the proverbial rock you turn over in a creek and something else crawls out from underneath it. It's just, where do you start? $100 million for a rail project in Pelosi's district. I called it a subway, and somebody asked me if it counted for the $5 footlongs, not the sandwich shop, but the underground. And, public transportation, I served on the study committee in the State House years ago. I spent 16 years in Nashville, as you all know. And I think the best public transportation in the country ran at 40% efficiency at that time, and that means that 60% had to come from somewhere else, and which was always the taxpayers. And this will be no different. Anytime you start a project or like a subway, the environmental issues, it'll be a crazy overrun. And I think if you look, if you follow the money from the last project similar to this, that it's even more egregious when you get down to who is receiving the profits from it. There's $1.5 million, which doesn't seem like a lot of money, but I'll tell you what, the people in East Tennessee, $1.5 million is a heck of a lot of money for a bridge project in Schumer's area. $350 million bailout for these mismanaged Democrat-controlled states. And what happens when I was in the state legislature again, when the tobacco buyout or the tobacco bailout or whatever you want to call it, they sued the tobacco companies and they settled for this humongous amount of money. And they rewarded these states that were adversely affected by tobacco. It doesn't matter where you are. To me, it's a personal responsibility issue. It should have never occurred. Not a big friend of the trial lawyers, obviously. But it was sent to the states for them to educate people not to smoke. And what they did was they just basically they put a little in education and run some bogus commercials. But you all know, you see Hollywood, the good-looking guy, the good-looking girl, driving the nice car, lights up a cigarette, and then boom, all that money they spend is just wasted. But what they did instead they just use it to balance their budget. So in reality, they didn't. In Tennessee, we balance our budget every year. We were mandated to do that with zero debt. And so it was just a free-for-all for that money. And that's exactly what they're doing now. We're rewarding bad behavior. We're rewarding these states that are mismanaged. We're not telling them, usually there's a carrot and a stick. This is just the whole carrot. Forget the stick. They just basically just rewarding bad behavior. And then what's going to happen when the money runs out? Guess what? They're going to have that much on top of it. It's just a constant spending thing. They always have a way to spend. And then, of course, tobacco is one of the only products that's used correctly. It will absolutely, positively kill you. But so you use it, you tax it, and then it goes away, allegedly. And then, but you still got that you balanced your budget on the back of this, and then it goes away. Then you got to find another way to tax the hardworking Americans. And something else is something's not out there. But right now, California has a budget surplus, I believe, of it's either $20 or $40 million, and we're going to reward them with incredible wealth, our money, again. And the whole thing is a boondoggle. They're just paying, and there's union pensions in there, and of course, Planned Parenthood is always sneaking around getting something out of it. There's $12 billion in foreign aid. Dadgummit. I realize I serve on foreign affairs, and we've got to watch the Chinese because they're not our friends. They are out to wreck our way of life and keep. I've told people I don't think they want to destroy us. We're like a drug addict to their dollars or yen or whatever, and they just want to keep us alive. But they're going to drain us for the rest of eternity, and we are just willing partners in that. $500 million for the arts and humanities, libraries and museum grants. Dadgummit, that has nothing to do with COVID relief. It's just, again, and of course the $15 an hour federal minimum wage is tucked in there. And something people have not, I'm sorry I'm talking so much. If y'all need me to stop, just give me the axe. But on the minimum wage, I'm all for people making I'm a capitalist. I believe in it. I believe in the system. I've had businesses, and I've been wrecked by big government in one of those businesses anyway. But what's going to do is cause I study this state of Tennessee again, what's called compression. You raise the lower wage. Now you've got somebody making $15 an hour, but you have a skilled laborer who's making that exact same amount. He's been working at that job, working at their craft. So in fact, and that creates a very disparaging situation. It hurts morale. You have people that it hurts your productivity, and then you'll have to raise that eventually, but then you compress against the other layer, and so it creates and what are they going to do? I'll tell you what they're going to do. The last time they discussed raising the minimum wage when I was here in Congress, it was oddly enough the same week that the group from all the groups from automation were here talking about the good things about automation. So we're going to lose a lot of those jobs. Automation's going to take over, and you're going to see more and more working people out of work and more small businesses close. And of course, some of our progressive liberal Democrats, they're really not Democrats. I think they're more Marxists, have said, well, those businesses, maybe they ought to go out of business. And that seems to be more and more their goals to do just that. $100 million for environmental justice. What the heck is that Green New Deal doing in this thing? It's just more of the same, more of these mandates. And, they put these restraints on American business, and they're generally lobbied by foreign interests, the truth be known. And of course, the Chinese, they're not going to follow any dadgum laws. Have open pit burning over there. They don't pay any attention. They don't care about their people. They don't care about anything, just our dollars and their ruling class. And the gravy train is the final. You want to know where the final stop on the gravy train is? It's right up here at the US Capitol. And that's basically it in a nutshell. There's more to it. I'm sure they'll find stuff out, and then the Democrats will say, "Oh, we didn't know it was in there," and we'll have a study committee to find, and that's a joke.
Well, Congressman, you mentioned the minimum wage, and you're so right about how that works. Even the Congressional Budget Office said that it's going to destroy 1.4 million jobs because it makes it unsustainable, especially for small businesses, mom and pop operations. They don't have any choices. They'll have to cut down on the size of the payroll if this thing were to go up. So you're so right about that minimum wage. Are they still looking at a vote on this package, I guess, tomorrow? Yes. I know most of the Republican caucus, it seems like, is most of the Republican caucus going to vote no? Give us a sense of when you think the vote is probably going to occur and what the Republican side looks like as they line up on this thing.
Yes, sir. Well, this is what happens when 20 million so-called evangelical Christians stay home and don't vote, and over 2 million sportsmen, gun owners, fishermen, outdoors people don't vote. This is what the repercussions are. It's just it's a train wreck. We can watch it coming down the path. We can't do anything about it. Just get run over. And I think tomorrow will be the vote, unless Speaker Pelosi in her reign of terror decides it's more advantageous for her to do it some other day. But it looks like tomorrow she'll do it late so that it'll be a rush thing, and we can, her people can get home and we ought to. what's really discouraging about me is that coming from Tennessee in the legislature and being a county mayor, we ran things very efficient. You know, you don't do anything all week. We have these votes naming post offices and things, and those things can be on more or less a consent calendar. There's no argument there. They don't even have to have a floor vote for them, but they throw those up here, keep us up here all week. And it's just like the barbed wire around the Capitol. It's just a facade, just to show, just for their messaging, and it's a control element, and that's what'll happen tomorrow. And she's whipped the votes, and she'll reward her people, and they've all got their little piece of the pie in there. But unfortunately, it's not our grandchildren. It'll probably be our great grandchildren that are going to suffer as well from this. This crazy spending. I don't care who's in the White House. This stuff just can't continue on. I voted against it when Trump was in the White House, and so I'm voting against it still.
Yeah. Tori?
I saw a staggering statistic the other day, the Obama era bailouts, when, the 2008 cash for clunkers, the $8,000 for new homeowners, all of the bailouts then during that time equaled roughly 3% of our GDP. And if this bill passes, the everything under the guise of COVID relief, which, as we know, is a very small percentage. What did you say? 9% is actually going to COVID relief. But under the guise of that, if this bill passes, it will be 26% of our GDP is how much we've spent. And that is just an insane amount of money. I don't think that people can really wrap their heads around how much $1 trillion is, much less multiples of that.
Yeah. Again, it's about who's in control, and they want to control every aspect of our lives. And they do not care about the country, the fiscal, whatever. They don't care about you and me. That's a joke. She cares about her jet airplane that taxpayers pay for, and her supplied whiskey cabinet, and her lifestyle. And that is exactly what the ruling class does. And they're showing it because they don't care about us. They throw this stuff out and say, oh, look at all this free stuff we're going to give you. And the people line up for it. I mean, you look at it on the internet, I can't believe you're voting against COVID relief. Well, I'm not voting against COVID relief. I'm voting against, over $1 trillion worth of wasteful spending that will never get back. And it's just, you can rapidly see the decline. I had an old party chairman back in Knoxville, Tennessee, a guy named Lloyd Smith used to talk about it, how it's hard to avoid the process when it's basically there's oppression, and then you overthrow the oppression, and then you have some relatively good years, and then you realize you can vote your own the treasury, and then once they get a taste of it, and then it starts that cycle again of oppression, and where you can see it, and there's really they've never been able to reverse it, but you can slow it down. And we're going up with light speed, and you figure people like the squad and that group are really what's running this thing, and that's a scary proposition. You probably have 50 or 75 like-minded Democrats that sort of think like we do. They're working class people. They represent their people. They maybe differ with us on a few issues, but they're pretty close to it. But they're so afraid of Pelosi and basically her henchmen that they can't react any other way.
So that's a really good point. So the fiscally conservative Democrats, I know that there's plenty of them still out there, or they try to claim that they are when campaign season rolls around, right? So that there's plenty of Democrats that claim to be fiscal conservatives. How do we reach out to them and reach across the aisle to them, or help stiffen their spine to vote against this wasteful spending?
I think you just got to do it at the ballot box, and people got to educate themselves. They need to get their grandkids or their kids to show them how to use that dadgum computer and figure out how these people voted and what they voted for, because they're lying to you if they tell you any otherwise. And I never understand the mentality and the weakness of the voter when they don't research the issues. And too many of us are afraid to fight. Honestly, you get beaten down and you think that everybody's against us. And the reality is, I think the majority of this country still thinks like the good folks at Americans for Prosperity do. That, you know, we have a certain amount of personal responsibility, and we should take it. But we've allowed to be shouted down in the pulpit, in the town squares, and you know, and people just think, and they've told you your vote's not worth anything. So there you go. You're at a gun show, and probably half the people there don't even vote. They don't know who they are. I was at a horse auction of all things, and that's, you know, farmers. And I was sitting next to a lady from another state and I was talking to her, and she was fairly well educated, fairly well to do. And, you know, and I could tell by the way she's dressed, the way she was talking, educated. And I asked her who her congressman was, and she didn't know. She said, and they said the US Senator. I said, no, you're congressman. And so I said, what county are you from? And I looked it up, and it was one of the more powerful members of the Congress, literally, and they were from that state. And she didn't know who her congressman was, so that told me right off she didn't vote. And these are educated people that should know better, like farmers. I mean, they're the ones that are going to be impacted by some of these crazy laws that we're passing. Yeah. And yet they aren't educated. And we've been told you can't preach it from the pulpit. You know, and it infuriates me that the other side sure as heck can. And we've allowed, you know, and I will have another hearing to discuss it, but nobody's willing to put forth anything, any action. And that ticks me off. I didn't come up here to get, you know, to be pacified and roll over. I came up here to fight.
Yeah. And, you know, and speaking of involvement and folks getting involved, folks who are watching, you can click on the I Volunteer link there. And in literally about 90 seconds, you can make your voice heard. I know you may be thinking, well, boy, here in Tennessee, we've got two good senators, with Senator Blackburn especially, having been in there several years now, and a brand new guy in Senator Hagerty. We've got good House members. I'm sure everything's fine. But truthfully, they need to hear from you. They need to know that folks back home have their back when they're fighting terrible legislation like this. So if you would, take a moment, just click on that I Volunteer link. It's in the comments section, or if you'd rather, go to our website, americansforprosperity.org, americansforprosperity.org. It'll literally take about 90 seconds to send your message on this legislation, and really any other legislation you want, but especially this Biden-Pelosi $1.9 trillion boondoggle that we've been talking about. I urge you to do that. Get involved. You can also get involved at the state level in Tennessee. You know, the congressman is right. You've got a good legislature and a good governor doing a lot of good stuff, but they need to know you've got their back when they're doing the right thing. And frankly, if they start doing the wrong thing, they need to know you're paying attention. So please take a moment and do that. Congressman, I know that you are well attuned to your folks back home, but do you think that members, your colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, do they still, I know I used to work on the Hill many years ago, and most members that I knew kept a running tally of how many folks back home had reached out to them on particular key issues, because they wanted to know, you know, they got to get, you know, elected in a year or 2 years. Is that still the case on the Hill? Do most members that you know still kind of pay attention and keep a track of how much they're being contacted on issues like this $1.9 trillion spending boondoggle?
Now, some do, but the reality is the left has gotten a hold of the social media so much, and our people are gutless sometimes. And two, I think they work and they're taking their kids to you know, camping or, you know, soccer practice or something else. They don't really have time to reach out, but I think it's very important they do. If you because the other side sure does, and they wear us out with this stuff, and you get a that's an excellent point, Tim. I'm glad you brought that up, because I would you can follow me on Twitter if you want to see. I mean, I get threats on Twitter. Some dirtbag said something about how he's gonna something about my daughter, you know, and I don't know about y'all, but I'm like the pizza place. I say bring it. Me and him will have a conversation eventually. And then the abuse that we take is just unbelievable. You know, when we go into an airport now, some of the members have to have a U.S. Marshal walk with them, some of the conservative members. They tell me, say, Burchett, you better take your congressional pin off. And I told them, I said, you better take it off of me yourself. I worked too hard to get that dadgum thing. If somebody wants to fight, we'll fight. I mean, I'm not being over dramatic, but that's the truth. I don't give a rip. I'm over it. I'm not going to put up with their garbage anymore. And I would hope the American public would too. And they need to get off their butts on election day. And it's so important to call. I guarantee you the other side is covering us up, and they are. I've read some of the social media and the contacts about how heartless I am to want to vote against this. And, it's just on down the line. They misrepresent the facts, and then people start believing you just get covered up, and it wears thin on some of these folks. I've been in office for over 20 years, 26 years, I guess now. I mean, I get it. I know the public response. I don't have to do a poll on these issues. I'm back home at Wright's Cafeteria or Ball Market number 3. And you know what? People tell me what they think. And they keep sending me up here with bigger numbers than they did before. So I keep a running toll, but it's usually just in my head.
Yeah.
And but the other side wears us out. And I think it's a great point that you make, Tim, that people give positive reinforcement. And when they don't, you just let them hear it, because
that's right.
It's amazing to me, the preachers that I hear from on some of this stuff. They said they've read that something's in this bill, and I'm thinking, you should have been preaching this stuff from the pulpit and informing you don't have to cross the line. You can have an attorney or an ethicist tell you how close you can get to that line, but some of these things they're passing are just criminal, and you're pushing us towards a Marxist state, very close.
Yeah. Well, Congressman, I know you've been very generous with your time, and you've got to get back up pretty soon to the floor. Thank you for your time. And Tori Venable, why don't you close us out, if you would, with a good word this morning?
Well, thank you to all the Tennesseans who joined us today. Getting involved and reaching out to your legislators is such a key importance. There's things that you can get involved in at the state and local level as well. This, however, is one of the biggest threats that's going to face us in the long term. A $1.9 trillion, $350 billion bailout to the cities and states that have not managed their situation well. Tennesseans shouldn't be paying for all these other states and their bad financial decisions. So we hope that you reach out, look at the eyeball, send a letter to your congressman, send a letter to your senators, reach out to your state legislators on issues you care about. Your voice is so important, and you need to be heard. This is what the grassroots does. So thank you for joining us.
Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate y'all. Appreciate my good buddy David Shine Thompson back in Knoxville too, as well as his work he does with us. Thank you, Tori.
Goodbye, everybody.